macroeconomics, and the social sectors in developing economies. Before joining Colombia, she held several senior country economic positions at the World Bank, primarily covering Latin America. Professor Calvo will now give us a brief introduction of the member of the panels, and we'll begin with the questions.
Thank you very much, Luca. Muy buenas tardes. I will continue in English. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I would like to congratulate the organizers for the topic. They're very timely, and the fact that you incorporated a session on social development is very important, particularly because even though the region has done very well in the last at least 10 years, we don't know about the years ahead. We have been thinking about opportunities for business here, and having worked, and as one of the panelists said before, having been exposed to many crises in the region, I think we cannot take what has been happening now as permanent. We have to think as a great period, and let's cross our fingers that it will continue. But the forecast that we are reading about suggests that the region may slow down. China is a threat. The price of commodities that have been very important for the success of the region are gradually going down. So I think the challenge for all of us is to maintain what we have achieved. And I think that social development is one of the most important achievements of the region in the last 20 years. Furthermore, we all know that the middle class has grown a lot, but that middle class is very vulnerable. And when you start thinking about the risk of losing what you achieved, are very important from the economic as well as from the political economy point of view. So I'm very pleased to introduce this panel. I think it's a fantastic panel. We have, many of you know our panelists. We have Dr. Elisa Carrió, who is a national deputy of the city of Buenos Aires and a former presidential candidate, better known as Lilita. But I'm sure she wouldn't mind if we call her Lilita. We have Nathalie Celi, ambassador of Ecuador to the United States. Nathalie not only is now an ambassador, but she also serves in the International Advisory Board of the Netherlands Development Organization, and also has been a Minister of Production and Social Development. So the combination of those things is what she's going to talk today. And we also have Gustavo Yepes, Professor Yepes, who is currently the Director of Management and Social Responsibility of the Faculty of Business Administration at the University Externado of Colombia. So you have their CVs, their bios, so I don't want to use more time to talk about all their accomplishments. You have them there. So let's jump into the topic. And our first speaker is going to be, I'm going to go alphabetically. And our first speaker is going to be Lilita. And it's going to be in Spanish, but we're going to have translations, simultaneous translations. So Lilita, please.
Buenos días, encantada. La verdad que mi formación, a ver con esta voz se escucha igual. Mi formación es académica y la verdad que yo hasta los 40 años no estaba en política y fui profesora titular desde muy joven de una universidad del norte de la Argentina, profesora titular de Derecho Constitucional y de Derecho Político. Así que mi perspectiva, en realidad, de categoría de análisis, viene desde ahí. Lo que pasa es que después me convertí, ¿no? Entonces también me dio una perspectiva distinta de las cuestiones de Occidente, ¿no? Yo tenía una formación clásica, republicana, constitucional, y la conversión me lleva a las raíces de la antigüedad, a la búsqueda de una discusión que ustedes la tienen que tener, que es la libertad, y de dónde es.
Let me ask, do we need the English translation here? Yes? Do we need? I'm asking if we need it.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Apologies in advance. Yes, I'm in trouble now. Lirita spoke about her background, initial training, trained as a lawyer, so her approach to analysis originally was a constitutional legal nature, but at some point she had a breaking with that background. She has a conversion, and it takes her to ancient studies, so to speak, as to what is liberty, and that is one of the main questions that drives her today.
Entonces, lo que tenemos que tener como categoría analítica para ponernos de acuerdo sobre el significado de las palabras es que yo no distingo entre populismos, no populismos, yo distingo entre repúblicas con poderes controlados y distribuidos, donde hay libertad, y autoritarismos de toda la ya. Bueno, claro, primero hay que ponerse de acuerdo en el lenguaje, porque si no podemos estar hablando de cosas distintas. ¿De qué hablo yo? Primero, que las precondiciones del desarrollo económico y del desarrollo social están dadas, a ver si esto lo entendés bien.
She's saying that the first and most important step is to agree on the vocabulary and the wording that we use.
¿Está?
And if the preconditions for social liberty
dependen de sus sistemas políticos
depend on political systems
e institucionales.
and institutions.
Y ahí distingo, ¿verdad? Amor. Y ahí distingo, se entienden todos, yo soy profesora de alma, distingo entre repúblicas
She sets apart republic, nations, republics,
y de formas distintas de autoritarismo.
and different types of authoritarian systems.
Los autoritarismos pueden ser neoliberales, pueden ser de izquierda, pero en todo caso no son republicanos.
She's indifferent to the type of authority it is. It could be on the far left or on the far right, but they are not Republicans.
Y este es el problema de América. ¿Eso se entendió? ¿Está? Creo que es América, para mí. Para mí América es toda América, desde Canadá hasta Tierra del Fuego.
America goes from Canada to South
Esto
America.
parece una película divina. Bueno, una película, dale. Entonces, es toda América. Y estábamos hablando con ella de aquella reunión entre, y decía, coincidíamos recién, en la vieja reunión de Frondizi, Arturo Frondizi, un gran desarrollista, el único presidente estadista que tuvo la Argentina de 1930 a la fecha, con Kennedy, donde la Alianza para el Progreso era justamente una estrategia de América.
So,
¿Qué pasó? ¿Me están pegando?
Sobre alianza, nacional de arriba.
Con él, no, con ella.
So what Elisa was saying with the moderator upstairs is she was discussing the Alliance for Progress, and which took place under Kennedy, of course, and Frondizi, who was the first statist president of Argentina.
Años 60.
60s.
Ahora, es América. ¿Por qué es América? Geopolíticamente estoy hablando, porque América es la hija de Occidente.
Geopolitically, America, why America? Because it's the
Y es
daughter
toda América.
of the West, from north to south. The whole of
Es el mind power de los Estados Unidos y también es la conversión al catolicismo en América Latina, con sus asimetrías, con sus injusticias, con sus autonomías, con sus raíces étnicas. La vieja Europa está muriendo, pero es la madre, y uno a la madre no la mata. Ahora, el hijo que es América, es decir, nosotros, ustedes pónganse en América, yo no sé qué norte, sur, pero quiero explicar esto, ya no podemos mirar al Atlántico, nosotros hemos mirado siempre el Atlántico, y ahora tenemos que mirar a Rusia y a China. Es decir, que la cuestión pasa por el Pacífico.
So there the issue is that Europe, despite being the mother of the Americas, is dying, but you cannot kill your mother. But what we can do is turn to the Far East, and that being Russia y China.
Desde esa perspectiva, nosotros somos los que tenemos que representar en el futuro de toda América los valores judeo-cristianos que en lo laico son los valores liberales y republicanos.
And it's our responsibility as Americans to represent Judeo-Christian or modern neoliberal philosophies or ways of being going forward.
Creo en la Alianza del Pacífico.
She supports the Alliance for the Pacific.
No creo en los regímenes de pseudo-izquierda que esconden nuevas oligarquías corruptas.
She does not support the pseudo-left, which has new sorts of corruption.
Creo que los populismos o llamados populismos son tiranías soterradas.
Populism or alleged populism is kind of a hidden tyranny.
Creo en la libertad de expresión sin límites, aún de la prensa amarilla.
Unquestionable free press, even in cases of yellow journalism.
Porque John Stuart Mill decía, yo no creo ni pienso como vos, pero daría la vida porque vos puedas decirlo.
John Stuart Mill said he believes in freedom no matter what, even I'll defend it to your death even if I disagree with you.
Y que lo que hay es nuevos ricos.
And what there is now is the new rich.
New rich. Nuevas oligarquías con viejas oligarquías.
New oligarchy with old oligarchy.
Y yo no creo ni en las oligarquías neoliberales ni en las oligarquías de pseudoizquierda. Creo en la democracia, en la república, en la libertad y en la justicia.
And she does not support any sort of oligarchy.
Yeah.
She believes in democracy, liberalism.
Y por último, después lo explico, hay que dejar de pobrear a los pobres. Los pobres quieren ser de clase media. Y hay que poner los mejores instrumentos en los peores lugares. Y si cambia el ambiente, y si el chico pobre está en Colombia como ustedes, va a tener posibilidades.
We have to stop treating the
Y los populistas usan a los pobres y los traicionan.
We have to stop treating the poor like the poor, giving the same advantages as the upper class. If they're in Colombia with us, we should give them the opportunities to move forward. And the oligarchy abuses the poor.
Well, thank you very much, Lilita. It's kind of difficult to land in the social development arena. However, I'm going to try. And I think that if there's something that we have learned in recent years, and I would say in the last 20 years, is the role of external factors on the outcomes in the developing world, and particularly in emerging markets, and particularly in the region. So even though today we have governments, excellent governments on the Pacific and other places, still our economies depend a lot on external factors, and we cannot forget that. So, to continue with the connection, Ms. Ambassador Celi.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. I'm delighted to be here, and I join you, Sara, in congratulating all of you in thinking, in organizing this conference and giving us the time to talk to you, to start a conversation, a deep conversation that we all should have in what we have accomplished in these last 20 years, and reflect in how we got there, and what the future needs, and the challenges that we have to overcome. And let me talk a little bit, and I don't want to talk about Latin American, because always averages, high the high heterogeneity that region has. But let me talk about something that I think all Latin America has in common. First of all, I think we should be proud about how we have been able to become a middle-income, a middle-class region, and I think that's a really interesting accomplishment in itself. 50 million of people came out of poverty, and I think it's something, and inequality has been reduced in the majority of the countries of the region, and I think it's something we should be proud about that. And we have done that with macroeconomic stability. The crisis of 1998 was not a start by Latin America. It has different sources, and I think that's two things that we need to keep in mind. But there are there's a single thing that has not changed in the region. And I'm not going to debate about democracy. I think Lisa did a whole introduction in that. What I would like to focus is in the kind of growth that we have experienced, what we have learned, and the challenge that we have ahead in the context of my own country, Ecuador. So if you compare Latin American exports 20 years ago to now, we now have 60% of Latin American exports are commodity, in compared to 40% 20 years ago. I mean, that's a commodity boom just there. And that hides a lot of things too, because if you take Mexico out of the question, and in some degree Brazil, there's 80%. 80% of exports of the region remains commodity. So we have done really well in taking advantage of the commodity boom. Yes, we did very well. So there's a lot of discussion about is the growth of Latin America being a sustainable phenomenon. I mean, that growth is being driven by just this commodity boom, and of course, what is behind all that is the productivity dilemma that we face. And I think that's what the challenge is going to be for the following years. And of course, having a middle income class is going to make that challenge even more difficult to achieve. And I think that relates to something that is really in depth in the reforms that Ecuador is trying to do, and it has to do with human talent. How you prepare Latin Americans that recently went out of poverty lines and are very vulnerable, I agree with you, Sarah, they're very vulnerable, to take advantages of a better integration in the world, a more open liberalization type of integration, and how do you conclude with you manage the problem of productivity. Remember that our growth is being also driven by internal demand and by a lot of influence from outside, through financing or through FDI, right? So we're still very dependent. So in some regards, our growth is very different from the Latin American growth, the Asian growth, which was based on savings, internal savings, a lot of FDI, but also savings, and of course the competitiveness of export. And all the Asian countries did a lot of reform in the economic side. And that's why is that important to the progress of Latin America, because now you need to make sure that what we did, and we did fine, which was conditional transfers to the poor, we did really well taking advantage of the commodity boom, providing access to education and health, but that is not enough. That's not enough, and we need to really concentrate in how we prepare our people, those very vulnerable people, to integrate better in the economy. And let me put that in the context of my country of Ecuador. Perhaps you don't know this, but Ecuador has managed in the last 7 years to become an upper middle income country. That's something that I see some surprised faces in the audience. Yes, we are not a middle income country anymore. We are upper middle income country, and that happened because since year 2000, when the economy was dollarized, we have managed to grow at a very sustainable rate of 4%. The last 7 years, we have grew at more than that, at 4.3%, which makes us second after Peru in the South American region regarding having that kind of rate of growth. So, and that also is important to say that in the beginning of the government, of the President Correa government, we did a very important tax reform. No, we didn't increase taxes. We just cut the loopholes to tax evasion and tax elusion, and we managed to increase 5 points of GDP in revenue. So it's not only that we're taking advantage of higher oil prices or higher commodities, it's that we did a structural reform that was needed. So everybody was being part of the development of the country. Everybody was paying their own share to development. And with that 5 points of GDP, we made 3 priorities in the country. First, infrastructure. If you're dollarized, we have a very difficult challenge to be productive and competitive, not only depreciating our currency, but actually reducing the cost of transactions for enterprise. Ecuador is a socialist. It has a socialist government, but don't get us wrong. We believe that the main engine of growth is private sector, no government, not the state, private sector. And the role that we have been playing in the economy is just to provide the right competitiveness conditions so business can compete and not only internally but globally. So those windfalls from oil and those 5 points of GDP in larger collection efforts that we did have been invested in infrastructure to regain competitiveness. I don't know if you know this, but we climbed 15 places, getting very close to Colombia here, in the World Competitiveness Index last year. And those gains came from our increase in a better infrastructure, but also in human talent. And that's the second priority what we did, human talent. And not only we did what is easy to do when you have money, build schools. That's very easy to do. No, we did a very, very deep structural reform of the education system that I can talk later because I only have 7 minutes now, but I would like to talk more about that structural reform that sometimes, leftist governments don't do. We did that in Ecuador, and thanks to that, we are not only giving access to education, but we're getting better quality of education. Just to give you an example, we have a program that already has sent 7,000 students to the top universities in the world, including Colombia, of course. And the third element of those investments are being in decentralized the resources to also local governments to make the process of investing a more participatory decision. So local governments in the past did not have access to the monies of the oil rents, for example, and we changed that. In the sense, if you will do a map of Ecuador, you will see that the poorest areas of the country were, sadly, related to the ones where we extracted oil. That is not happening anymore, and the reason that it's not happening anymore about the decentralization of resources and how the poor areas of Ecuador where oil was extracted, now it's getting all the attention that it should have all the time. So not to say that everything is going okay. I think every country has its history, every country has different institutions, and I think Ecuador political institutions and Ecuador institutions in general were really in crisis 7 years ago, and to the point that Ecuadorians were very disaffected and were very unsatisfied with the level of those institutions. We need to rebuild them, and we're in the process of doing that. And of course, there's a long way to institutionalize all these changes that I've been talking about, and I think we should, our challenges also reside in how we make citizens more part of this process and how we make it sustainable. I don't know if it will be good for the 7 minutes.
Let's stop here. Gustavo, please. We're jumping now into more sort of the contribution of the public sector to these processes that we have been discussing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yo también voy a hablar en español. Pues primero quiero agradecer a los organizadores pues por la invitación, el honor que me hacen. Espero no meterme en problemas con estas dos posiciones tan diferentes. Como académico voy a intentar dar mi punto de vista lo más objetivamente posible. Para esto, eso voy a intentar hacer. Muy bien, para poder dar un punto de vista al respecto, creo que tenemos que irnos un poco más atrás a mirar algo básico. Hay un señor que se llama Manfred Max Neff, un economista muy famoso, chileno de origen alemán, que hablaba, lo conocí en el 2003 en un evento en Colombia y oí un discurso que me pareció muy, muy interesante. Él decía que todas las personas, todos los días...
Sí,
¿El economista cómo era? Okay, sorry. Okay, I forget.
Gustavo would like to start, first of all, by saying that he's an academic, so he'll try to find balance between the two women who are seated to his left, which Anita says is uncommon. And he wants to start by going back in time, and he wants to discuss a mini-head with an economist here in Colombia, a Chilean economist we met here in Colombia.
Okay. Manfred Magnitz, el economista que les mencionaba, habla respecto a la vida y dice que todas las personas, cada momento, cada situación, pues determina nuestra vida.
This economist says that each moment and situation are the determinants of our lives.
Un paso adelante, un paso atrás, 5 minutos más adelante, 5 minutos más atrás, te cambia la vida.
5 minutes can change everything.
Él dice también que eso que vale para las personas vale para las sociedades.
And that those differences that impact people can impact societies.
Y comienza a evaluar y a presentarnos los caminos, los senderos que nuestra sociedad nos ha traído hasta acá.
So he begins to present the different paths that our society can take to reach this point.
Por ejemplo, en el siglo XII habla que en Italia, precisamente aquí estamos en la casa de Italia, curiosamente.
So the example is of Italy in the 12th century, ironically because we are in the Casa Italiana.
Había un hombre que se llamaba Giovanni Bernardone. Giovanni hablaba del amor. Él más tarde se llamó Francisco de Asís.
This man named Giovanni used to write and discuss love, and then he changed his name to Francisco de Asís.
Él proponía el amor
He
en
proposed
general.
love.
Hablaba del hermano Sol, de la hermana Luna, del hermano Lobo.
Brother, son, and he spoke of these things.
Sin embargo, en el mismo siglo presentan entonces las ideas de Maquiavelo, quien creía que es más seguro ser temido que ser amado.
But then he shifts to discuss Machiavelli, who believes it's better to be feared than to be loved.
Y nuestra sociedad eligió ese camino, el de Maquiavelo.
And our society chose the Machiavellian path, not the love path.
Dice que ya en el siglo XIII había un señor llamado también en Italia Giovanni Pico de la Mirandola, quien defendía una tesis, tenía 900 tesis, sobre la concordancia que había entre las diferentes religiones.
In the 13th century, there was another scholar named Giovanni
Pico de la Mirandola.
Pico de la Mirandola, who said
900 tesis.
he had 900 different theses.
30 años después, había un señor llamado Francis Bacon, quien nos invitó a torturar a la naturaleza para extraerle la verdad.
We then had Francis Bacon 30 years later, who challenged us to torture nature in order to extract the truth.
Nuevamente, ese fue el camino que tomamos, el de Francis Bacon y no el de Pico de la Mirandola.
And again, we chose this path. We chose Francis Bacon over this Pico.
A esto lo traigo porque estas situaciones que nos encontramos en este momento y estas posiciones que podemos encontrar enfrentadas en todo el mundo se deben a esa elección que hemos hecho a través de nuestra historia.
He brings this up now because he's of the belief that where we are now in history and in society is a root cause. The root cause was the decisions that we made in our history.
Desde 1955 creemos en algo que se denomina el crecimiento, que se lo inventó el señor Kuznets.
Since 1955, we believe in growth, which was invented by Mr. Kuznets.
Y todos los esfuerzos que realizan los gobiernos, el sector privado, la sociedad, busca entonces que el crecimiento, como lo propone el señor Kuznets, busca, entre mayor crecimiento va a permitir que se reduzcan las diferencias sociales.
And the belief has been since 1955 that growth, which is driven by governments, by the private sector, by society, is what is going to shrink the difference between society.
En el 82 incluso el Banco Mundial propone algo similar con el medio ambiente.
Which leads the World Bank in 1982 to propose a similar thesis in terms of the environment.
Buscamos entonces el crecimiento para reducir la pobreza y reducir el impacto ambiental.
So growth will be used in order to compress the differences in the classes of society and also to improve or decelerate environmental impact.
Entonces este crecimiento nos comienza a traer algunos problemas tales como que no se puede cumplir este tipo de objetivos porque no se puede considerar que el sistema funcione porque no hay equilibrio.
Which leads to direct challenges because you cannot believe in growth if there isn't inequality.
Algunos sectores, o mejor, se piensa entonces que nuestro sistema va a permitir que todos ganen un poco y que pierdan un poco y así todos van a lograr al final la felicidad y van a ser ricos.
The belief was that everybody could gain a little and lose a little, but over time everybody would be rich and happy.
Y los gobiernos están para equilibrar esa situación y que ninguno tenga ventaja sobre los otros.
And the role of government is to lend equality to that equation and that no one has an advantage over another,
Sin embargo, vemos que eso no se ha cumplido.
which has not been the case.
Y a pesar de que los economistas son bastante optimistas, yo con todo respeto creo que no se va a cumplir.
And though economists are very optimistic, he doesn't believe that this will ever happen.
A pesar que creen que en el 2025 se puede acabar la pobreza extrema, según el profesor Jeffrey Sachs.
Despite the fact that according to Jeffrey Sachs, for example, in 2025 poverty can be eliminated,
O en el 2035, según el presidente de Microsoft, que acabó de presentar su optimista visión hace unos meses.
or that poverty can be eliminated by 2035, according to the president of Microsoft, who presented a similar optimistic thesis a few months ago.
Yo soy un poco más pesimista al respecto. Creo en las palabras de un Nobel en literatura que se llamaba Saramago, José Saramago.
He's less optimistic in this regard, and he instead believes in the words of a Nobel Prize winner in literature.
Voy a utilizarlas entre comillas, textualmente lo que decía Saramago.
He will quote directly.
Estamos hundidos hasta la mierda del mundo y no podemos ser optimistas.
We're sunk to the shit and we cannot be optimistic.
Fue Saramago, ¿no?
Saramago, no.
Él dice que no podemos ser optimistas. Quien es optimista es insensible, estúpido o millonario.
We cannot be optimistic. If you're optimistic, you're either insensitive, stupid, or a millionaire.
Yo tengo en mi oficina escrito en una hoja esta frase.
Which he keeps hung up in his office, this phrase.
Y cuando alguien me critica la frase, no le gusta, le pregunto que qué es, si ya sé que no es millonario.
So when anybody criticizes that phrase, he asks them what they are, since he knows they're not a millionaire.
Claro, no estaría en mi oficina si lo fuera.
Because he wouldn't be in his office if not.
Muy bien, a lo que me refiero con esto en particular es que tenemos un sistema que, aunque propone que todos vamos a recibir la felicidad en un futuro, solo se lo permite tenerlos a uno.
Which leads him, why is he discussing this? Because the belief is that this current system, despite the fact that it posits that happiness and equality is available for all, only allows it for the singular, for one.
Y esto se debe a controles por parte de ciertos grupos con gobiernos, corrupción e impunidad también con ciertos grupos.
And this occurs because certain groups operate with impunity, because they have control over the government, or because there's corruption.
Por eso voy a terminar entonces con las palabras de un peruano religioso que se llamaba Gustavo Gutiérrez Merino.
So he will wrap up by quoting a Peruvian religious figure, Gustavo
Gutiérrez Merino. El padre Gustavo tenía una frase muy especial. Él decía, la pobreza del pobre no es un llamado a una acción generosa que la alivie, sino a la construcción de un orden social distinto. La pobreza del pobre no es un llamado a una acción generosa que la alivie. Alivie.
The poverty of the poor is not a call that cures them.
Es un llamado a la construcción de un orden social distinto.
It's a call to action for new social order.
Por eso entonces aprovecho este escenario para invitar a todos ustedes, quienes lideran o van a liderar muchas iniciativas en el mundo, para que podamos restablecer y ver que el mundo puede cambiar.
So if you would like to use this forum with so many people who are involved in changing the world to come together and show that the world can be changed.
Otro escritor, Borges, decía que si hay unos ríos que nos hacen inmortales, también deben haber unos ríos que nos vuelvan a ser mortales.
And he wraps up with a quote from Borges, who says, if there are rivers that make us immortal, there are rivers that also make us become mortal again.
Si nosotros hemos llegado a este sitio y estamos en esta situación, entonces nosotros también vamos a poder encontrar la solución en la alternativa y ustedes son los llamados a hacerlo.
If we've gotten to the situation, we can also get to the solution, alternative situation, and he calls upon you to do so.
Muchas gracias.
Gustavo, thanks so much. This panel has become so philosophical that I'm having trouble asking questions. I thought I had some challenges ahead and I understood the topic, but now I don't know where I'm standing. So I need help from the panel. So, Lilita, would you like to comment on Gustavo's need for a new social order?
Yo discrepo con varias de las posiciones, no tuyas, sino de las citas. Yo no comparto la concepción de Saramago.
She disagrees with some of the positions, not his, but some of the quotes, specifically Saramago.
Saramago culpa de todo a los ricos.
Saramago only blames rich for everything.
Y la pregunta es, ¿qué es ser rico?
To which she asks, what is it to be rich?
Ser rico no es ser millonario.
It's not to be a millionaire.
Ser rico es andar por la vida despojado, sin citas.
To be rich is to go through life without...
Yo creo que las buenas personas y las malas personas crecen en todas las clases sociales y también en la iglesia.
Good people and bad people exist in all social classes and in the church.
Y que nadie es culpable por haber nacido rico y nadie es culpable por haber nacido pobre.
And then no one can be blamed for having been born rich nor poor.
Creo en otro humanismo, profundamente judío-cristiano y liberal.
She was in a different type of humanity, deeply...
Y tengo formación de izquierda, pero no me gusta el resentimiento de las izquierdas que no creen en las repúblicas y en la libertad.
And though she considers herself a leftist, she doesn't like resentment towards the rich.
No creo en la caridad, porque el Estado debe ser justicia.
Doesn't believe in philanthropy because...
Pero me parece que hay una incompatibilidad entre Borges, en toda su obra poética y literaria, y Saramago.
She sees a discrepancy between all of Borges' works and those of Saramago.
Creen, uno es un universalista, casi anarquista, Borges.
With Borges being a universalist, almost an anarchist.
Y Saramago es un marxista.
Saramago being a Marxist.
Y ahí hay un problema enorme. Enorme.
Big problem.
Entonces, no se puede... yo rescato a Borges porque en todo caso sembró a toda la filosofía, hasta el mismo Foucault en las palabras y las cosas. Foucault ha tenido que tomar a Borges, que estaba irremediablemente y maravillosamente loco, vivía en una biblioteca, ¿no? Y él decía algo que yo sí comparto. Y lo leí cuando yo era chiquita y lo único que tenía que hacer, porque vivía en un pueblo aburrido, era leer. Por eso aprendí cosas, ¿no? Mira, y cosía también, me gustaba.
She prefers Borges because he founded philosophy, and she read this when she was young, because when she was young, she spent a lot of time reading.
Yo leía Borges 13, 14 años.
13 or 14, she was already reading Borges.
Y creo que él definió los dos graves errores de nuestra región.
Which she has used to define the 2 or 3 biggest errors in our region.
Un día dijo, la democracia no es una cuestión de estadísticas.
Democracy should not be an issue related to statistics.
Lo que supone decir que los que creen que la democracia se define solo por el voto y no por las razones, construyen autoritarismos. Esto es Argentina, esto es muchos de los países que están representados acá. El abuso de la estadística. Las mayorías no pueden aniquilar las minorías.
The use and abuse of statistics
Eso es autoritarismo.
is authoritarianism, and this is Argentina,
Segundo.
as well as other countries in the region.
Los derechos humanos se hicieron para los enemigos, no para los amigos.
Human rights were designed for enemies and not for our friends.
Y se construyeron para los delincuentes y para los enemigos, para lo que no queríamos. Y hoy en América Latina los enemigos no tienen derechos humanos.
But today our enemies don't have human rights.
Y todo es pura conspiración ilusoria.
It's all an illusionary conspiracy.
Si no hay moneda estable, que es lo que sucede en Venezuela y en Argentina, o si hay un encierro como en Perú con la dolarización, no hay soberanía.
If there is not a stable currency, which is the case in Argentina and Venezuela today, there is no sovereignty.
Y los empresarios no son culpables de la emisión monetaria.
Business people are not responsible for currency issuance.
Los demagogos son culpables de la emisión monetaria.
The demagogues.
Y con respecto a Natalie, para finalizar, decir algo que a mí me parece importante. Yo creo en la educación del porvenir. Creo que tenemos yo soy optimista. Hablaba ayer con los chicos residentes argentinos que la oportunidad de democratización del conocimiento que tenemos es extraordinaria. Ahora, el tema es qué circula por las redes. Porque por las redes puede circular nada o pueden circular valores.
She places a tremendous value in education and the use of networks and the internet has both democratize education, although the concern is that it is used both for pushing the good
Así
and the
pasó con la otra revolución, la de Gutenberg.
Which is what happened with
La de la
the
imprenta.
revolution with the printing press.
Y de ustedes depende poner en las redes valores, ideales, troncos y no ramas superficiales.
So it is up to
Y el
us
hogar.
to place values and principles that are deeply rooted and not just simple branches on the internet to spread.
En esto consiste la libertad hoy.
And that's what liberty consists of today.
Thank you, Lilita, and I'm glad I heard the word money, because as an economist I can start to relate to it. Yes, this is going beyond us, but let's land in Ecuador that doesn't have a local currency. So has that been a constraint? How do you see Ecuador vis-a-vis other countries that don't have stable currencies?
Let me first of all share your same feelings. Being an economist, I'm overwhelmed by the philosophy, but I think it won't hurt a little bit, a humble economist, to try to do a little bit of philosophy as well. First of all, I believe in a society where citizens have the right to determine what they want. I believe in a society where citizens have the freedom to aspirar, to have aspirations of betterment, life. I believe that freedom is not only determined by the right to speak. I believe that freedom is not only determined by the right to vote. Freedom is determined by the right to really exercise every single human right. And I also believe that every country, and I don't preach any ideology, I don't preach any philosophy, I don't feel myself the holder of the truth. I think everybody should do their own seeking, but I think society should try to balance the individual needs to achieve the entrepreneurial that is really needed in a society to spark and to, but also you need to find a balance where you get together for collective action. And I strongly believe that the states play a role on that, that states should foster citizens the truthful exercise of all freedoms, not only the speaker right, not only democratic freedoms, but also economic and social freedoms. So, for economists, let's stop the philosophy there. Okay, going back to your back to your question, which is it's a very profound question, and it really had us thinking in Ecuador for a long time. Of course, being economists, not having monetary policy in our hands, but rather in the Secretary of Treasury of the United States, is a difficult task. But Ecuadorians have spoken, and Ecuadorians have designed that they prefer that they found a lot of advantages in having the currency for the last 14 years. And getting out of that is more difficult than keeping it. And keeping it requires a lot of discipline. And keeping it requires a lot of public-private partnerships and coming together to do a lot of things. Because one of the advantages of the valorization system, Sarah, is that I found that the business class in my country has changed a lot. And that's because they need to compete. They need to, productivity is not only come for depreciation of the currency, you really need to do. And I think it's something we agree in our country. It's about keeping the dollarization together, and it has been difficult, and that's why we're concentrating in infrastructure, logistics, human talent, and also we're applying the instruments that the WTO provides to us. For example, when I was Minister of Production, we applied a balance of payment correction that helped us to deal with the crisis of 2008, where we managed to grow. Even that, I know that Ita doesn't like the figures and numbers, and I agree with you. Numbers high, realize that you need to take consideration when you do economic decisions. But that's the state of affairs in Ecuador. But I would say we're concentrated on the structural reforms in providing Ecuadorians the access to quality of education. And just allow me to talk a little bit of that, just to give you an impression of how a lefty government, being so difficult to introduce teachers' evaluation, meritocracy in the system, not having the unions taking hostage our kids in education, not to provide them education, having universities accredited by United States accreditors, so we can guarantee that public and private educators can comply with all the criteria needed. So I think we're moving in the right direction, in the sense of creating the environment for human talent and creating an environment for people like you to come to my country and to invest. There are many opportunities there, and of course it requires the commitment of private and public sector to work together in those issues.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Let's give a chance to the audience to ask questions.
Hello, my name is Ezequiel. I'm from Argentina and a student here in Colombia. In Argentina, we have a lot of resistance from teachers to make evaluations on their performance. And I know that in Ecuador, as you mentioned just now, you were able to carry out that reform. How was it possible?
Let me collect a few, particularly if they are related. And is it related to education? Okay, so then.
Should I answer now? Okay, that's a really interesting question, and I think it starts first of all with having a common national agreement on how important is education, and also to reivindicate the role of professors in society. In my country, we have such a damaged system that when the entry salary levels for educators was so low compared to even other public professions, public jobs. And the first thing that we did was to correct that. If you wanted your kids to be taught, you need to attract the best of society. Not whoever didn't want to get another job in another part. I mean, you need to bring the best. So we increased the salaries of the entry level of the teachers so we can get the brightest, the youngest talents to come. And we worked with teachers for a year. I mean, I think what we did first is to prove them that we really want to revitalize their roles. I mean, we truly understood that the role was crucial for the education reform. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, we tend to forget that 10 years ago, we used to have 2 or 3 national strikes where kids were out of schools for 15 days or more, and now that doesn't happen. But I think it was a process where we commit and we show them that we're serious about it, And also there was a lot of pressure from the society. I was the Minister of Social Development but then. I had the whole social sector in education, part of my cabinet. And I think also I had the help of business, the business community and the business leaders that didn't want to, be being told like they were correístas, but they came on board. I mean, they believe in the reform, and they spoke in behalf of it. It was a moment of national union too. And we did that together.
Since this is a panel on social development, one thing that I haven't heard anything about at all is gender equality and women's rights. Talking with someone earlier, she mentioned that at least in Mexico it's a cultural problem that once a woman marries and has kids, she willingly gives up her career. What's being done to promote women in business roles?
We'd like to take care of women.
Hoy las mujeres, por lo menos en la Argentina, de hecho, la presidenta es mujer y la líder de la oposición también. Yo he visto el cambio en la política. De hecho, en la crisis del 2001, las mujeres hoy son las que más trabajan en la Argentina.
In Argentina today, she says that the leader, the president, is a woman, obviously, and so is the leader of the opposition, and that since the economic crisis of 2001, the people who are most in the workforce are, in fact, women.
Y que hay lugares centrales, yo por lo menos vi la experiencia parlamentaria.
She saw it from Congress.
Yo fui la primera presidente de la comisión. Había 2 comisiones, 3 comisiones que eran de hombres. Solo hombres.
There were 3 congressional committees that were only men.
Defensa, presupuesto y asuntos constitucionales.
Defense, budget, and constitutional issues.
A mí me tocó, siendo muy joven, ser presidente de la Comisión de Asuntos Constitucionales.
And as a very young woman, she took the lead on constitutional issues.
Y hoy, las presidencias de defensa, seguridad, pero vemos en la política, están todas en manos de mujeres.
And now issues like defense and security and several things in politics are...
La ruptura del techo de cristal tiene que ver con ejemplos.
The glass ceiling is broken with examples. One more question?
Hello, thank you. I'm from North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, visiting. Thank you for having me. I'd like to follow up on that question because she actually took the question, but I don't think you answered the issue of women in business. In government, I would agree with you, but in business, especially maybe not in Argentina, but in the rest of Latin America, there is a lack of women in positions of high power, and that's something that I'd like to know how we can address moving forward.
You're totally right. I mean, you see a lot of advancement in Latin America that we should be proud of, particularly in the political sphere. But I think in the business it's less. I mean, if you go to the top boards of top companies in Latin America, you don't see women that often. And I think it remains a cultural problem. I think in politics it's, in a good sense, related to public goods and doing better. And of course, there's a fight of power there. But I would say it needs to be rooted in culture. And I think it needs to be tackled even from in school. I mean, in education, it needs to be. There's more to do in education regard the roles that women can play in business. As we did, I mean, we fight in Latin America for political participation, and in some governments, it played in some countries and in some governments. It played well. I mean, there's a campaign, for example, in my country that was played in 2008 that won a prize about machismo and violencia and how, girls can play roles that stick with them. And one of the roles, of course, is being a mom. Another role is being a teacher. Another role is being a senator, a congressman, or ambassador even, but not a businesswoman. So I think we need to change that imaginario. We need to build that construction, and education plays a big role. And I would say mothers plays a big role too, in the way that we raise our children in general. Not only the women, but most importantly, the men.
Thank you very much. I think we covered a lot of issues. Thank you very much for the panel. That it was really illuminating and food for thought. And talking about food, I think lunch is over there. So thank you all.